I'm going to try decoupage for the very first time. Let's see how it goes. I have this really pretty piece of tissue paper, some Dixie Belle paint, and this cute little vintage end table that I picked up at Goodwill. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put down a layer of Dixie Belle chalk paint. This is the color chocolate. I think it's kind of a close match both for the table and for the tissue paper. So I've got my Best Staying Brush by Dixie Belle. It's recommended that you wet your brush when applying chalk paint, so I misted some water on it. And now we're going to go ahead and paint the entire surface of this little table. With chalk paint, I like to hold my brush directly kind of at a 90-degree angle and then go in little circles. So I get, there we go. So I get a nice smooth finish and I make sure that I don't miss any spots. It's kind of interesting how this color, it's called chocolate. It looks like chocolate. So I feel like I'm smelling chocolate when I'm using it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my tissue paper down to size. I'm just placing it on the table where I want it to be and using my fingers to kind of mark the edges. And then I will grab my scissors and cut it down to size. It doesn't have to be exact and it doesn't need to be a perfect cut because I am going to come in and trim around the flowers in just a moment once I get it in place. So now that I've cut it to fit the table, what I'm doing is just kind of going in and cutting around the design. Like I said, I have never decoupaged before. I have used glue to put fabric in drawers. I've done little things like that, but this is my first try using this type of tissue paper. And I'm just following steps I've seen other people do before. I have some Mod Podge at my house, so that's what I'm going to use to put it down. And I have this little brush, so I'm just going to put down a thin layer of Mod Podge. I think this is like matte, but it doesn't really matter because this is going underneath it. And then I do have some that's in a satin that I will put over the top. I've seen people use kind of wadded up plastic wrap to push their paper down onto the Mod Podge. So what I did is I grabbed a plastic cooking glove and I'm going to use that to slide across the paper. I think what this does is it keeps your fingers from sticking on it. It keeps it from tearing. Also helps prevent getting any of the glue. I'm starting in the middle and then pushing towards the outside, trying to get any wrinkles or creases out of it, and then going in and applying a little bit more Mod Podge around the edges. Now, I did realize I did this wrong. I should have applied Mod Podge to the entire area extending beyond the piece of paper because it doesn't really matter if it gets on the painted area where the paper's not going to be because I'm going to go over that with paint again. And it would have been a lot easier than trying to do the edges like I'm doing here. I also think doing the entire piece at one time, like putting down a layer of Mod Podge and then pressing the paper, would have been easier than doing it in little sections. But this is the method that I chose, so I went ahead and I stuck with it once I realized I probably should have done it a little bit differently. It takes a lot of patience to push out these little wrinkles. And I am worried that when I'm done, I'm going to have some creases in it, but I'm being really careful not to apply too much Mod Podge and not to tear the paper. So, here I tried putting it directly on the paper. That didn't work. So I think applying it on the table is the best method. So I'm going to go back to doing that. You can see the background of the design on the paper is a little bit darker than the table itself, but I think I have some ideas on how I can blend that once I get the paper applied. And yeah, like I said, I should have just put it on the table and then pressed the paper down. The other thing that I noticed is I probably should have flattened my paper out or gently steamed or ironed it so it wouldn't have the creases in it. So here it is with the Mod Podge down. Now what I'm doing is I've got my chocolate chalk paint again and a small brush this time, and I'm just going to extend the paint onto the design so that I eliminate that seam where the two meet. This is going to help make it look like the paper is, or actually like the design is painted on versus a piece of paper. So I am just getting a little bit of paint, gently tapping it. It doesn't need to be a solid coat of paint. If there's a little bit of transparency to it, that's okay. And I'm going all the way around where the paper and the paint meet to blend them together. And I'm also coming in a little bit where there are blank areas between the flowers and the stems so that I can make it look a little bit more realistic, like the vase of flowers is sitting on the table versus has the darker background. And remember, wet your brush when you're using chalk paint. So you can see there's a couple places where the paper isn't laying perfectly smooth, but I think when I go back over it with my second coat of Mod Podge on the top of it, I'm hoping that those will settle into place or that I can push them down and eliminate. So I'm just going to keep going all the way around the edge here with my chocolate paint, flip it over to the other side, do the same thing to kind of blend where the paper meets the table. You can see there's an area there I didn't glue down very well, so I'm going to have to come back in and fix that. This is really kind of fun. It's very relaxing and very therapeutic to do this. And I think this is really the secret to decoupage is not just putting it in place, but then taking the time to go back and make it one with the piece of furniture or whatever object you're applying the design to. And I just keep going all the way around until I have blended the edge of the paper with the table. Kind of getting in there in between the flower petals. You know, a little bit of the darker color on the paper is fine because you would have natural shadows. But you can see what a difference it makes. Like watch when I go around this tulip, how the paper and the edges just kind of disappear when you add the paint. And it's hard to tell when the paint is wet, but when it dries, those edges get a lot harder to see. And I just continue doing this all the way around, going into the design of the flowers. You can see we're even going a little bit into the middle of the bouquet. Want to make it look as realistic as possible. Anywhere there was a lot of the dark shadow, I added a little bit of that brown chocolate paint. Okay, and here's how we're looking. This is after the first round. I can see a few places where I want to go in and add a little bit more of the chocolate brown, but it's starting to look a little bit more natural and you're starting to lose that clear line where the paper met the table. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some of my chalk markers and find colors that are similar to the design and kind of go over any area where there were visible creases or, the paper had kind of gotten rubbed white from applying it and just kind of tapping it on there and then smudging it with my fingers when it's still wet. And it's hard to see on film, but it is covering up those little lines from where the paper was folded. And this is just a little extra step. I think it's just going to make it look a little bit nicer when it's finished. And this is a box of multicolored chalk markers that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. And these are great to have on hand for any type of craft that you're doing. There we go. It's helping to remove those seams and those lines and make it look a little bit more realistic. Right here, there's a green stem that almost looks like the line, but the line's next to it right there. And I'm just touching it up very gently with a little bit of black. Kind of helps make it disappear. All right, and then I'll let that dry. And now I'm doing my last touch-ups with the chocolate paint to do even a little bit more blending around the edge of the paper and the table. Yeah, this is a multi-step process. I typically let it dry overnight in between each step. So this entire table took me about a week to do, just, 30 minutes a day. It's kind of a fun project. It's a small project, so you could do it indoors. I did it outside on my patio. I live in Arizona, and October weather is really beautiful for working outside. Plus, the Mod Podge has a strong glue scent, and I didn't really want that smell in my house. All right, we've got the design finished now. I have added and blended, and now it's time to do a little bit of final touch up. Just adding some brighter colors, a little bit of white in a few places, just to kind of make some of the flowers pop a little bit and give the illusion of shadows. This probably isn't necessary. I just thought it was kind of fun, and it just kind of helps me touch up anywhere the paper was less than perfect as well. I did come in with a smaller paintbrush, just to get in a little bit between some of the stems and the leaves and the flowers with the lighter color chocolate chalk paint. All right, and then it's time to apply our top layer of Mod Podge. I just did kind of similar to the first layer. I put it on in smooth, even strokes, tried not to have any heavy brush marks, went from the inside of the design towards the outside, and then covered the entire top of the paper. I did use a satin Mod Podge for this. 2 coats, let the first coat dry real well overnight, and then I came in with a second coat. And I did notice that anywhere where I had a little bit of a bulge or wrinkle or had not really glued it down well the first time, the second coat smoothed that down onto the table and helped eliminate and hide those mistakes. So there we go. The table itself was in really good condition. All I needed to do was clean it, and then I went over it with some wipe-on poly to give it a fresh new top coat. This is also in warm satin, so it kind of really just brings out the beautiful details of the legs, the details of the harp base. This is a Mersman table. These are really high quality, not too rare. I do see them for sale from time to time, and I grabbed this one when I saw it at my local Goodwill. This table also had the really cute clawed feet, so I removed them, cleaned them really well, and then buffed them up with some rub and buff to make them nice and shiny. And here we go. Here's the finished project. I think it turned out quite lovely. There's some things I definitely would do different, but overall, this wasn't bad for my first try. If you think I did a good job, give me a like, and I would love for you to subscribe and follow me for more like this.